Good afternoon and welcome. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge all the brave women, children and families who are going through such unimaginable terror, devastation and loss. We stand with them and we stand with Ukraine. So, hello everybody. My name is Gill Nowell and I'm head of electric vehicles at LV General Insurance, where I'm spending a lot of my time working on our electric car knowledge hub, Electrics. I have 10 years experience in the world of electric cars, in the energy industry, but also doing a lot with community and on the advocacy front. So welcome to this panel session under the Empowering Electric Women EV Summit series on what is, of course, International Women's Day. It therefore seems very fitting indeed that our discussion will centre on the topic of how can we improve safety and accessibility and affordability for all. Of course, we're talking about this specifically in relation to electric cars and charging in public, especially where women and also those who identify as women are concerned. It's quite rightly a hot topic, and there are some really great initiatives underway. For example, calling on local authorities and charge point operators to make public charging a safer experience. So I'm really delighted to welcome our panelists today. We have Erin Baker, Editorial Director at Autotrader, Kate Tyrrell, Founder at ChargeSafe, Charnjit Saranna from Electric Zoo, Maria Bengtsson, who is a partner with EY, and Iryna Kocharova from Lloyds Banking Group. What I'd like to do is I will be inviting each of our panelists in turn to talk for 5 minutes on the topic of how can we improve safety, accessibility and affordability for all at public chargers. Based on their own experience as far as possible. This will then be followed by 5 minutes Q&A. So we'll have panelists, Q&A, panelist, Q&A. Please do submit your questions through the magic of Zoom, and I will do my best to put those questions to the panel after we've heard from each of them. So if I could ask Erin Baker to get ready. So Erin will look at narrowing the gender gap in automotive and offer some context to the topic of women in EV. So thanks so much, Erin, and over to you for 5 minutes, if you don't mind.
Oh, 5 minutes. I could speak on this for hours, but I will try to limit myself. So 2 things here, obviously. Number one, the gender gap in automotive, and then I'll come on to women specifically in electric cars. The gender gap in automotive is vast. We're kind of battling against a legacy of 100 years of this being a male-dominated industry, a male-dominated product all around engineering and powertrains, but we're in a huge period of transition. Even if we were to do nothing about narrowing the gender gap within automotive companies and also the gender gap between us and the consumer, it would change anyway, because electric cars are happening and those products are more suited to women. They are more about interiors, they are more about the environment, they are more about recycled materials, and they're not about oversteer and carburetors and that sort of thing anymore. So there's that angle, but that's not to let us off the hook. There's a huge amount that should be done. In my industry, in automotive media, you know, there's about 250 car journalists out there, and about 10 of us are women. That's clearly not good enough. You know, the 46% of license holders in this country are women and growing at a faster rate than men. And we just don't see it reflected at all in the product or the media. you know, the research that we've done at Autotrader seems to suggest that 94% of women distrust dealers, 83% of women distrust car brands. I know as a female motoring journalist, there are very few publications and media out there and platforms communicating to women, recognizing women as perhaps having different needs around their next car purchases to men. And yet that is the case, because our data at Autotrader shows it's the case. Women want broadly the same things from their cars at that top level. But when you start to look at what they want from the next car in detail, actually it's radically different. The language they use around their cars is radically different. Where is the communication strategy for women consumers? 77% of women find car ads hyper masculine, and actually so do men. Men are off put by that kind of masculinity around car advertising too. So there's absolutely a gender gap in automotive, both consumer facing and B2B, that needs radically addressing in order to get to a gender neutral position, which is where we want to be. The second part of what I'm going to talk about is women in electric. And actually, I think this is really concerning. We've done a lot of fresh data this week at Autotrader around electric car take-up, which we know, I'm doing a lot of TV and radio today about the fact that take-up of electric cars has stalled and seems to have stalled. And the reason for that is the continued high sticker price of electric cars. They are on average 37% more expensive than their petrol and diesel counterparts. And added to that, the crisis in Ukraine means, as we all know, a squeeze on energy prices, and energy prices have gone sky high, which means that electricity for consumers has gone sky high. So actually people, when they should be turning away from the pumps right now and looking at electric car take up, they're not. Added into all that mix, the government is threatening to take away the last remaining incentives. So electric cars are not a palatable choice at the moment. For women looking at buying electric cars, it's even worse. They are hugely lacking in the right information. There's a lot of misinformation. For female consumers at the moment, 20% of women say they haven't looked into buying an electric car. It's not really on their radar. They're just not aware of it. They're not aware of the choices. They're not aware of what they need to know, the knowledge around it. 62% of women are not aware of the current government grants. And when you consider that there's a current government plug-in grant, that there is a home charger grant that ends at the end of this month, unbelievably. There is a huge benefit in kind taxation benefit, 2% at the moment. 62% of women aren't aware of any of this stuff. 16% of women, when questioned, didn't know about the 2030 ban on petrol and diesel new car sales, versus only 5% of men not knowing about that 2030 ban. You have to ask yourselves why. And I don't think that this can be because women are less intelligent than men, that women aren't aware of what's the changing state of affairs, but they don't have the communication stuff. The media don't talk to them. They're not engaged in the process. So there's just a gap there, a huge gap in communication, a huge gap in empathy, a huge gap in everything. I'm being screamed at and told I've only got 1 minute left. I could carry on forever. Hopefully we can come back to the topic, but I suppose it's time for me to hand over.
Thank you. There's so much insight there, and I'm really looking forward to reading that report that you mentioned. So we've had some questions come in for you, Erin. First one: women drivers still face a lot of misogyny. What can be done to begin to overcome this problem?
More women behind the wheel, more women in jobs in automotive, more women engineers, more women motoring journalists, more women CEOs. We need to build that pipeline coming through from schools and universities of girls interested in careers in automotive, and that they need to understand there's all sorts of careers: manufacturing, sales, marketing. So there's all that stuff. It is the case of you've just got to have more women seeing more women in every step of the car journey, from inception of cars to sales of cars, advertising and everything, social, everything.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Erin. And just before I go on to the next question, actually, I made a note because you said that electric cars are more suited to women. And I think that's a fascinating statement, because from my understanding, and you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, way back when cars were just being sort of invented, actually electric cars came first.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, you can see at various points during the last 100 years, these huge spikes of interest. Between the First World War and the Second World War, there was a huge spike in the number of women racing drivers at Brooklands who had some very successful careers, and then they all kind of tailed off. So there have been all these points in history where women have tried to engage with automotive, but failed to kind of properly break through. And what I mean about women and electric cars having more of a natural kind of symbiosis is that we know that women traditionally like to engage with sustainable products and sustainable ways of living and lifestyles outside of automotive. So we have to ask ourselves why within automotive the same rules don't apply, the same trends don't apply. And it can only, given that 46% of licenses are held by women in this country, and that's rising at a faster rate than men, why the massive disparity? It's got to come down to the lack of communication, the lack of suitable content, the lack of channels, the lack of empathy, the lack of awareness, all those bridges that need to be built.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Erin. So another question, this comes in from Vicky Robbins. Has anyone conducted any research into how we can optimize language to encourage more women to give feedback around EV charging requirements?
Oh, I was about to get very excited there because I've done a whole load of work around the language women use and what language we need to use in return. But I suppose when it comes to charging requirements, there's no difference. The same rules apply, which is that the automotive industry, and actually this is for men and women, the automotive industry has been incredibly guilty all the way along of piling jargon into its communications, sales strategies, advertising, everything. You know, as soon as it talks to men and women about the car they would buy, you know, everyone starts talking about brake horsepower, torque, all this stuff. And with the move to electric is the chance to strip out all that jargon and make this a really friendly, easy product. And that includes charging networks, right? But everyone starts talking about electric cars and the electric charging networks and how to use them by talking about things like price per kilowatt hour. I mean, who the hell knows what a kilowatt hour is? Who cares what a kilowatt hour is? All we want to know is how much money do I have to put in? How much money do I have to put into the charger to be able to drive my car for 200 miles? Just tell me, you know, how many subscriptions do I need to how many different networks? How do I find out if the charging point is free and if it works? Where is my nearest charging point? How do I know any of this stuff? And so car brands, charging networks, everyone, the entire industry has to make a concerted effort to strip out the jargon.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've written a piece recently on that, Erin. You know, we just need to simplify the language and make it accessible for everybody. Absolutely agree. So a question then from Rebecca Whitmore. Do you think that with more OEMs offering direct to consumer online journeys, that this will impact the accessibility for women?
It's an interesting one. I would hope yes. I take it she's referring to kind of the agency model and more sales going online and fewer people going into dealerships to purchase their cars. One would hope that the move online made it easier for women in a way who traditionally have had such a poor dealership experience, because they no longer have to worry about having to go in and haggle about prices or know about the jargon, the right jargon to use face to face. They won't have to have an uncomfortable negotiation. But that does mean that OEMs and retailers and anyone who is going to sell cars online has to be very careful about the content that they're putting together and publishing. And it goes back to, is that content user friendly? Is enough of the content written by women? I'm not asking for a takeover of all this by women and to oust men. It's not about that. We're just trying to get to a gender neutral point. My point is that to get to gender neutrality, we've got to swing the dial in that direction because we're trying to overcome that legacy of male dominance in the industry. So you know, hopefully switching to online retail, I hope there will be an increase in women consumers feeling more comfortable with the purchasing journey and feeling more comfortable to ask questions about EVs if they don't know stuff. You know, I just really hope that those barriers to purchase, those pain points come away at this point, but it will require a real shift in tone of voice, a real shift in empathetic language.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. Well, thank you so much for your contribution. If we can move on now then to Kate Tyrrell, who is founder of ChargeSafe. So Kate's going to give a few minutes on the background on ChargeSafe and its aims, Also, how they are working with Motability to ensure that there is a concrete set of standards that all charging networks can implement to ensure that charge points are safe and accessible. So thank you, Kate, over to you.
Thanks very much, Gill. It's lovely to be here. And I guess really just to start with how ChargeSafe has come to be. My experience is charging using the public charge infrastructure have left me feeling quite vulnerable at times. So, you know, now you've got your EV, you're on the road, congratulations. You might have to charge whilst you're out and about, but hopefully you'll be able to utilize at home charging as much as you can. But then what happens if you go on a long distance journey, or if you commute up and down the country, or you get stuck, maybe the power's out at home and you have to use a public charge point. So what happened for me was I was regularly traveling up and down the country in my electric vehicle, which I absolutely loved. And then I would get to a point where I'd have to charge through either lack of planning on my part, or just because the journey was so long. For example, from Portsmouth to Glasgow, you just can't do it on your 240 miles range, no matter how hard you try. So what I kept finding was actually my charging experience was quite often at the very back end of a poorly lit car park with no lighting, no security cameras, no human footfall. And I was feeling, you know, a little bit nervous about that. So, you know, no matter how many times I went onto Twitter and tagged in the charge point network operators to say this isn't enough, this isn't acceptable, nobody seemed to be taking me very seriously. And then I got to November last year when I was traveling from Grimsby to Portsmouth, a very similar journey. I've done it many times, and I had charged halfway down the country to ensure that I had enough mileage to get home on. I always try to make sure that I've got at least 30 to 50 miles excess on top of my journey time, so that I don't have to continue using public charging wherever possible. And then I was redirected, which was quite uncomfortable for me. I was in an area that I didn't really know. I looked at my mapping application and was told that there were 3 charge points within 20 miles of my location. So I set about the first one, which was in a very poorly lit car park, which had one other car full of teenagers, and the charge point failed to work. So then I had to move on to the second one, which was in a superstore car park, and the charger was hid underneath the tree in the corner of the car park. The superstore wasn't lit up because it was 1:45, energy saving, which is great, but not for safety. And it was also next to a dark alleyway. So I called the charge point provider because the charger again wasn't working, and I was starting to worry about how much range I had left on the car. And I spoke to a really lovely lady who was trying to reassure me and remotely initiate the charge, and it wasn't working. So I started to become quite panicked and started crying. I was shaking, and I said to her, I have to go. I need to find another charge point. And I left the conversation. On my way to the third one, it was actually on a petrol forecourt, but instead of being on that lovely canopied, well-lit forecourt, it was hidden around the back of the petrol station behind a fence in the dark, and that charger also wasn't working. I did eventually find a charge point. It took me an hour and a half to get there, driving at 15 miles per hour on the hard shoulder of the M3 to get to Winchester service station. It was very dangerous, and I literally arrived there on 0% charge, so very panicky. I then spoke to my partner about it. It's 2 a.m. in the morning, and I'm not happy with my experience. And he said, you know, why don't we just look at producing a solution ourselves? So I am really pleased to say that we have come up with a solution. And what this will mean is that we go to every single charge point in the UK, England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and inspect those charge points. And what we're going to do is give them a 5-star rating to let women know how safe that charger is. We'll let men know as well, but women are, you know, the ones who are probably more vulnerable in a dark, scary car park at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we'll give the charge point a score, so that next time you are looking for a charge point at an unsuitable hour, not only will you see if the charge point is working, where the charge point is located, you'll see that it's got a ChargeSafe score. And if it's anything less than 3.5 stars, it's probably worth avoiding it. So this is going to put pressure on the charge point network operators to upgrade the legacy charge points that are already in place to include things like lighting, security cameras, and potentially charge companion buddies as a telephone service to just sit and chat with on the phone whilst you're charging, to make you feel a little bit safer. And we're also looking at the accessibility to ensure that people who aren't very able-bodied are able to charge wherever in the UK and not just a selection of sites. So using this information, we're going to improve the current sites and also hopefully set the standard for all future sites, and therefore make charging more inclusive for everyone. I think that's all I can say at the moment, because again, like Erin, I have a minute left. So back to you, Gill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. What an awful experience for you to have been through, but thank goodness that the silver lining is that, you know, as you say, you've found a solution and you're doing something about it. So that's absolutely brilliant news. So we have a few questions for you, Kate, from Rebecca Whitmore. Do you think the fact women might be more likely to be travelling with dependents, and she says not sure if that is a fact, but is more often the case for her, makes them more likely to be concerned about charge points in terms of safety, but also in terms of reliability and issues, you know, things like cables not releasing and so on, which I actually experienced at the weekend.
Lovely. I do think that does factor into it, because obviously if you're responsible for little lives, you're going to be that much more alert as to your surroundings. I do think just women in general, whether you've got dependents in the car or not, we are just that much more heightened. You know, we've got that beautiful thing called intuition, and as soon as we get that knot in our stomach and we know that something doesn't feel right, we want to flee the situation. Probably a lot more difficult for those with dependents. I can't speak from personal experience, I don't have children, but I would imagine that actually that would make me more, for want of a better word, hysterical, in that I would want to be protecting the people in the vehicle as well as myself, and therefore having the information as to what a charge point looks like beforehand would be really helpful. Yeah,
indeed. In fact, I was talking to a friend earlier who has actually, you know, charged sort of in the earlier hours of the morning on numerous occasions, and she has indeed felt unsafe. She says she's felt trapped in her car, either with her young children or with elderly, you know, with elderly parents in the car as well. So, yeah, it's absolutely a concern. So Jenny Figueredo asks, what are the main criteria you will be assessing against? And she says, you know, she's guessing things like CCTV, lighting, what else?
Yeah, I definitely CCTV and lighting, and I think those are really easy fixes for a lot of the CPOs, but then there are other things to factor in that have come to light a lot more recently. So the 4 categories that each charge point will be scored on will be the environment, so whereabouts it is, the facilities, if there's any local facilities nearby, it will be, you know, are they well lit, are they close to the charger, for example, if you're on the motorway services, that's quite important. The charge points themselves, and then accessibility. So it's now become a 50-point inspection that we will be doing. 20 of those points are coming from Motability's upcoming hopeful legislation of what needs to be done from the accessibility point of view. But actually, past lighting and security cameras, it does come into other things that we hadn't even considered before, like the pre-authorization. So there is one network out there who is currently, I've had very recently had quite a palaver with them, take a pre-authorization, which is not a pre-authorization, it's a transaction of £30, and they say that they're going to refund you within 5 days of the charge the difference, which is all good and fine as long as you get the charge. But if the charger fails to initialize with the car, they keep hold of that £30 for 30 days. Now, if you're on a modest salary, which, you know, at the time I was on a modest salary, but also, you know, the electric vehicle is a company car, and quite a lot of people assume if you have an EV you must be extremely affluent. I had a particularly misogynistic man on Twitter tell me that, you know, I must be super rich to drive an EV. Not the case at all, buddy. And I tell you what, if that is your last 30 quid going on that pre-auth and it fails to charge, you don't have the money to then find another charger locally to then charge your car. And if it is 2 o'clock in the morning and you're on very, very poor range without being able to pay for a charge elsewhere, and you don't want to call your friends and family at 2 a.m. to say, oh, I'm in a bad situation, it's kind of dangerous, could you lend me 30 quid? Who wants to be stuck in that situation? So it will also come down to the payment methods, the ease of payment, how long do they hold on to your money? Because they are dangerous situations to be in. So we are really going into as much depth with these inspections as we can.
That's brilliant. I don't think I've got time for another question, unfortunately, Kate. Well, we've had so many come through, so there's clearly so much interest in the work that you're doing through ChargeSafe. So thanks so much, Kate.
Thank you.
If we could move on now, then, please, to Charnjit Saranna from Electric Zoo, co-founder of Electric Zoo. Charnjit will look at the increasing use of women using the Electric Zoo platform and share insight as to why that might be. She'll also consider why they decided to start Electric Zoo, and I love this story, moving away from traditional dealerships to utilising digital platforms. Over to you, Charnjit. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. That's a great intro. And yes, I'm sure you're very familiar with the story. With a 30-year background in automotive, I've had plenty of experience of the traditional world of automotive, but our story really revolves around our daughter and her desire or inspiration to study global sustainability. And that really got us thinking, and we thought about our own business model. At the time, we had a very successful prestige and performance dealership selling vehicles in a traditional way. And yes, all of the points that have already been covered were experienced even during that time. And it was really our daughter's inspiration that helped make the shift for us as a business. So we've spent lots of time evaluating what consumers, what's key to consumers. Is it having ownership? Is it having access to different types of vehicles? But it was the sustainability aspect that really made us shift and gifted our business away at the time to set out on a new venture to form Electric Zoo, which Lash and I did back in 2018. And it's been an exciting journey, I have to say, to come this far. And so what we have managed to do during that time is really take that research that we've done in the early days and form a digital platform which is totally gender neutral. It provides you the access of an electric vehicle where you're not purchasing the vehicle. It's a 3-click process, so you choose your car, you choose your term, and you can click and collect, or you can have delivery of the vehicle. And this breaks down some of the barriers that we've discussed in previously about the price of an electric vehicle, because you don't own the electric vehicle. It's about a usership model. You pay on a monthly basis, so it appeals to people that are on a budget. And it gives women the opportunity to make informed choices about what type of car that they choose to drive. They haven't got to be intimidated by going into the traditional dealership. They can basically look at what range the distance they wish to go, how long it takes to charge, and perhaps what the battery size is. And really, we've looked at the data that we've been able to collect on the people that are coming to our platform, and there is a huge shift in the demographic, and women certainly are making more of those decisions, and it is so around the sustainability side where they're making more sustainable choices, but also the ease of knowing that they can have a car. They haven't got to think about taking it for a service. They haven't got to have it MOT'd. You haven't got to waste hours researching which insurance is going to be best provided for you, because we provide that hassle-free, all-in-one solution to make the journey simple for the consumer. And what we're finding is, yes, it appeals to the younger demographic, as our daughter, as I said earlier, our daughter inspired us to make that change and really reflect on the choices that we make as a family. But it also focuses on people that are busy, that just need a vehicle to commute to work. They're not looking for something expensive to buy. They want the flexibility. With families, they're often limited to tight budgets. This gives you an inclusive cost each month of how much the car will cost them, but no, with the added safety of knowing that they haven't got to think about repairing the vehicle, they haven't got to be without a vehicle, and they can access that. They can access our platform at any time to suit. And it's a very simple process, because the whole process is online or digital. You're uploading your personal, your driving information, you enter your payment details, and it is as simple as that to access an electric vehicle.
Thanks so much, Charnjit. That's really, really interesting insight. So we have some questions for you, that's all right. Okay. A question from Diane Smith. Are women applying for jobs in your business in the same numbers as men?
Probably more. We've got there's more females in our business currently than there are males. So yes is the answer to that question.
Right, great news, great news. And do you have any advice for aspiring women looking to break into the automotive industry?
I think the shift to EV has given rise to lots of fantastic opportunities. I mean, my journey's been a long and varied one, but I think now there's more, there are more opportunities, certainly with more digital access to vehicles. And as manufacturers will no doubt also look at offering subscriptions rather than the traditional model, I believe there are, yes. As Erin alluded to earlier, it is about the educational part. It is about changing that shift, making it a gender neutral sector rather than male dominated.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks very much, Charnjit. And I think Erin alluded as well to, you know, to the trend towards kind of online, the use of digital platforms to buy, lease your electric car. I did a poll some time ago. I think, you know, had a good few hundred respondents, but the question that I asked was, because the way that I bought my electric car was I didn't even see it in the metal. I'd never test driven it, but because I knew that it was an electric car, I knew that I was going to be getting a great drive experience, and it was right for me and my family. And 18% of people who responded to that poll actually had also never even sat in their electric car of choice. So I wonder, do you see a big shift? Is it a significant shift, do you think, to the trend, and particularly, of course, of women preferring not to go into the dealership, but preferring that online digital experience?
I think from our own business, yeah, the data speaks for itself, and there definitely is an increase in women making those decisions because they can. It's easy to do so. They haven't got to. They're not buying the vehicle. So if they take the vehicle and it doesn't suit their use case, they can change it, and it's an easy enough process to do that.
Yeah,
so,
indeed.
Yeah, I believe that is.
Okay, thank you. So we have a great question from Jenny Figueredo. Is there a big difference in the makes and models that females tend to choose versus what men tend to choose?
I have to be careful answering this, but I think predominantly women will tend to choose something that's just practical for their use case. Perhaps they're not as concerned about the size of the car or what the capabilities of it may be. They're looking for the practicality, and the range is probably the biggest thing on their agenda, is looking at how far the car will go. But taking it away from the traditional model, going home and being able to plug your car in and not have to go to factor in a visit to a fuel station is also a huge difference that I personally can associate with, because the ease of going home and being able to plug in and charge, or when you get into the office you can plug in and charge. You haven't got to factor that additional time into what is already a very busy lifestyle.
Yeah, that's right. I think if you can charge at home, the ease and convenience of doing so, or indeed at your workplace, is one of the big benefits of EV, even with or in spite of rising energy costs, because of course fuel costs are going through the roof at the same time. Here's a question, last question. So just a very quick response, if you don't mind, from Sebastian Fleischhacker. Are you going international? We need this type of ownership model in Spain.
That's fantastic news, and we'll certainly bear that in mind. At the moment, it would be great to be able to supply nationwide and have additional hubs in the UK to be able to make our service accessible for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Charnjit. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
So our next panelist then is Maria Bengtsson, who is a partner with EY. Maria will consider what typically, although not always, is different between men and women's transport habits and what that means for e-mobility and charging. So welcome, Maria, and over to you.
Thank you, Jill. So just a quick reflection, first, maybe. It's really disappointing to see that the reduction in emissions in 2020 due to COVID was almost entirely reversed in 2021. So it's quite clear to me that we need to keep making progress. And to do that, e-mobility needs to be, as we've all said now, accessible, safe and affordable for everyone. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about what accessible and affordable means from a mainly women's perspective, looking at, as you said, activities which are typically carried out by women. And I appreciate that this is not going to be the case for everyone. In my own family, for example, my husband is doing the school runs and actually most of the grocery shopping as well. So clearly we're all different. However, we do know that women are more likely to travel with luggage and people. We're more likely to travel with more time pressure and also more likely to use multimodal travel. So this clearly then has implications for how women will come into contact with and use electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. So I'm going to use an example of someone who might be commuting by car to drop off her children at school, and then maybe park at the train station to take the train to work, and then do the reverse in the afternoon, and then maybe also stop off at the local shop on the way home. So this person in my example, she will need reliable and affordable access to charging close to where she lives. And if she doesn't have her own driveway, this will mean access to on-street charging. And currently, as we all know, access to on-street charging is nowhere near where it needs to be, certainly not now, and certainly not looking at future take-up of electric vehicles. And in this regard, I think that local authorities have a large role to play and need to work together with private investors to find ways to collaborate and provide reliable and affordable charging. Because if local authorities and frankly, other government organizations as well don't take an active role, the risk is that investments are not made in the areas where they are needed from a local community perspective, or that charging solutions are not comparable to off-street charging from a pricing or from an ease of use perspective. And in this regard, I think some important aspects to consider will be finding business models which enable investment to precede utilization. Obviously, that being one of the issues now with a lot of private investors concerned about uncertainty around utilization. It also needs to enable individuals to utilize specific tariffs that they have signed up for example, aligned to their home energy supplier, and also enabling individuals to locate the nearest available and working charger, and safely located as well, as we heard from Kate, without having to drive around the neighborhood. And if you think back to my example, the last thing someone needs coming back from work, having picked up the kids, it's getting late, they need to get back home. She doesn't want to spend time trying to find parking and charging and having to maybe walk a long distance once parked with 2 kids in tow and a lot of bags in the car, etc. So in addition to charging close to where she lives, she may also want to access charging at the train station, car park as a backup. And what she needs then is easily accessible chargers, again, safely located, and certainty overall that when she comes back to pick up her car, her battery is charged to an adequate level, and because she'll be rushing to pick up the kids from school for example. And so on Sundays, she may stop off at a shop as well on the way home. And if there is an available charger there and the charging is easy to use and to pay for, she may top up the battery there as well. And whilst there's already a great deal of partnering happening between charge point operators and supermarket chains, for example, as we heard from Kate, a lot of these chargers are not necessarily accessible, not put in safe places, and also they might not be very easy to use. Kate gave a really good but horrible example of the £30 fee, for example. So in summary, Jill, I think we need better accessibility, certainly that we have now. We do need to see more kind of collaboration between private and public to ensure that charging is where we need it to be from a community perspective. And it needs to be, as Kate very, very amply pointed out, in a safe place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you very much indeed. So we have a few questions for you, if I may. So first question, how can local authorities attract the investment they need to build charging infrastructure that's safe and accessible for women and for everybody?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a crucial question as well, actually. I think what they need to think about first and foremost is what does private capital need in order to feel secure that they can invest. And one of the things there is around the certainty and the utilization. So one of the things that they might want to consider is how can they create a structure that perhaps allows them to take part of that risk, and the private investor sort of offloading some of that risk to the local authority and providing that little bit of certainty that you will have, let's say, underlying monthly fees or other revenue streams coming in, which can sort of underpin whilst you have that volatility in utilization kind of on top.
Indeed, thanks, Maria. And I know that the government provides funding for local authorities to install on-street charging infrastructure through its on-street residential charging scheme. And I know that in the past that has been very underutilized in certain parts of the country. Do you know, is that still the case, or is that landscape getting better?
It's getting better, but I do agree with you, and I still see that, and a lot of it has to do with which I think is a common theme overall for EVs, is that information sharing. And a lot of times I find that lots of organizations, not just local authorities, but they don't have the time to really put themselves on top of all of the issues that is going on. They don't have the time, they don't always have the expertise, and first and foremost, they don't really know where to go to find that expertise, which means that as I think Erin pointed out early on in this discussion, is that if you don't have that awareness, it means that you're sort of almost excluded from that opportunity.
Yeah, indeed. And I think just time for a super quick question then. Do you think there has been too much focus on rapid charging lately, which may reduce the investment in destination charging with parking?
Yeah, again, I think for me, in order to make more progress, we need to think about the UK as a whole. Rapid charging is in a way, it's an easy question to solve, but the more sort of community charging is much more complex. And I think naturally that's why we've seen less progress there, but I think that's where the efforts need to go now for sure. Yeah,
indeed. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you.
So let's move on then to our final panelist this afternoon, Iryna Kocharova from Lloyds Banking Group. Iryna will talk about the revolution that the automotive sector is going through and how Lloyds is supporting that. Also considering how electric cars are financed. So Iryna, over to you, please.
Thank you, Gill. This afternoon. So yes, I would like to touch on the topic of what's happening in our industry and how is the finance industry changing in order to stay on track and support our customers and support people through this transition. So banking industry is changing, and it's definitely not standing still. At Lloyds Banking Group, our purpose is to help grow and prosper. We do that by creating a more sustainable and inclusive future for people and businesses that we work with, and our intention is to shape finance as a force for good. We want to be there for our customers, and we want to take them on that journey. We also want to help our customers make their lifestyle changes, whether it's their homes, their vehicles, their investment, pensions, and our aim is to create green products and services that make it easier for them to invest in tackling that climate change. Motor finance in particular, bringing it back to e-mobility, motor finance and leasing, where I work, forms key part of our vision for the future. Our mission is very simple, and our mission is to help make EVs accessible for all. And we project that by 2035, there will be about 20 million EVs on the road, and that will require about 400,000 charge points. And now we're very much focused on how can we ensure that people can have access to finance in order to buy those vehicles, and what supporting services that we need to offer to people in order to make transition as simple as possible. So at the moment, through our Black Horse and Lex Auto Lease and online car finance brands, we finance and lease 1 in 10 new electric vehicles on the road today. We're really proud of this achievement, and we just want to grow on it. So what we're doing, so we're now trying to help people to enter the journey, and we launched an online tool, support tool, aid in transition to electric and hybrid cars. It's super simple. You input some information about your lifestyle, what is it that you're looking for in a car, what are your driving habits, and the tool tells you whether an electric vehicle will be suitable to your needs, and almost takes it to the next level to kind of advise what type of vehicle might be better for you, depending on your personal circumstances. It's great. It really helps tackle that range anxiety, which is one of the key challenges that we've experienced when it comes to switching. We aspire to be UK's leading provider of low emission and green vehicle fleets as part of our aspiration to reach the net zero target for 2050. So we're really thinking outside the box now. And there are a number of ways that you can have access to electric vehicle. And I just wanted to drill into those a little bit more. So we ran a survey end of last year, asking people what are the key barriers to switching to electric. And number one concern was cost, obviously cost. And as I said, we're evolving, we're adapting, we're trying to make, get access to these simpler and easier for our customers. So there are several options available. You can buy a car for cash. You can borrow money to finance the vehicle by applying for one of our financing products, such as your personal contract hire or hire purchase. You can lease the car, or there is a new option on the market. It's called salary sacrifice schemes, and it's almost leasing but via your employer. Each option has its pros and cons, and it's very specific to personal circumstances. But I think what's important, and the point I want to make, there are many options available now to get access to EVs, and all of them have certain advantages. For example, if you're leasing a car, you're pretty much renting it. You're renting a vehicle for a set period of time. Insurance, maintenance, servicing can be included, so you have that peace of mind that if anything goes wrong with the car, it will be fixed. Or you can finance the cars through personal contract hire or hire purchase. Again, there's set payments, you know how much the car is going to be worth at the end, you have an option to buy it, or you can give it back. Equally with salary sacrifice, which I think was touched upon earlier in this discussion, you're essentially leasing, you're renting a car, but you're doing it through your employer. There are great benefit in kind taxation rules at the moment. The amount comes out from your gross salary. So there are loads of advantages, and it's another excellent way to access to electric vehicle. But what we're doing now, and I just want to really briefly touch on this because I'm being shouted at, we want to provide that end-to-end journey to our customers. We don't want to just provide the vehicle and then they're on their own. We want to really help them with the decision-making up front, which car is right for them. And we're launching a number of propositions to do that. But we also want to make the whole supporting services, you order your car and then what? Where do you get your charge provider? How do you change your energy? How do you charge on the go? You need to have 5 different subscriptions. And what we're working on is like a bundle proposition that will come alongside the vehicle and it'll take care of all of your electric vehicle needs. And I think that's what we all need to move towards. So it's no longer becoming, oh, I just bought a car and then I have to sort out everything else. It becomes a seamless one-stop shop. You come to your finance provider and they'll help you sort out everything else. And that's the aspiration. That's something that we're working towards launching later on this year. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. That's fantastic, Iryna. Thanks so much for that insight there. So we have a few questions for you. You'll be happy to hear, I'm sure. So great question coming up. Finance has typically been a male-dominated industry. Have you faced misogyny in your career, and if so, how have you dealt with it?
It's very interesting. I've been in finance industry for all of my career. And I joined Lloyds Banking Group about 12 years ago on a graduate scheme. And I could openly say that the cultural journey that we've been on has been fantastic. And have I personally faced misogyny previously in my career? Perhaps, but the only advice I could give is face into it. I always had, sometimes it involves having a very uncomfortable conversation, courageous conversation, but know your own worth. You bring to the table something that's very different. And, there's the whole theory about how male and female brains work, and sometimes we don't understand each other, but actually we benefit from each other. And finding the equilibrium and balance is really important. But I would say women who are entering the finance industry now, there are so many schemes. There are so many ways to support each other. There are so many good women supporting other women. That's really important. And I'm really passionate about that. And I mentor a number of women in organization. And I would strongly encourage women to apply for jobs in finance. We need that different perspective. We need that challenge. We need that friction across the table. Thanks,
Iryna. Thank you. Next question. Is there a role for the financial sector to play in giving women more opportunities to experience physically driving electric vehicles? For example, try before you buy schemes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do, as part of our proposition development, we're obviously looking at that flexibility that that people want, especially post the pandemic. That I think that became quite prevalent. And yeah, we're definitely looking at the propositions, that will create that additional flexibility. But actually, I would say the whole shift from ownership to usership has really been noted recently. And with leasing that I briefly talked about earlier, it does give you that flexibility. So you can be very flexible in the subscription models that are being offered by a number of leasing providers at the moment. But actually, if you have a leasing contract, you are able to adjust your mileage and your contract term to give you that flexibility. So absolutely, the industry is moving towards that. And I would say that's the future.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay. So Iryna, next question, one from Diane Smith. Will Lloyds financing include EVs within HGV last mile delivery trucks? And if so, will this include financing the infrastructure to support them? Really interesting question.
That's very probably a little bit outside of my day-to-day job, but I work very closely across the group with my colleagues in commercial banking who provide the financing the infrastructure. And the way we want to tackle, because we all know infrastructure is a really big influencing factor when it comes to switching to EVs, and it does require a lot of investment. And as I said, the number of charge points that need to be made available or to publicly available, but also the work that needs to be done on the grid as well. So we are working closely together on trying to identify opportunities, whether it's working with local authorities, working with the government on how to change and shape the infrastructure policy. and providing finance as well. You know, equity finance, debt finance, all of those options are available to us. We're trying to unlock and tackle the challenge together across the group rather than working at it in silos.
Thanks so much, Iryna. Thank you. And just to comment, I think, on the total cost of ownership angle, because this is something that we found, you know, at LV. So we did some research finding that 45% of people are put off from buying an electric car because of the upfront sticker price. So we've done a lot of work on what we call our electric car cost index, looking at the total cost of ownership of electric versus petrol and diesel. And actually, there are quite a few electric cars on the market today that come out more affordable if you look at you know, all the costs involved. So I think that's really important, and it maybe plays into what Erin said at the start, in that you know, however we're communicating about electric cars, we need to make the language easy to understand, just accessible, gender neutral. I think
I couldn't agree more. And something that Erin was talking about earlier today is, you know, how the cost is measured, and the units just don't make any sense. And you're just like, well, just say it's 5p per mile, or it's 6p per mile, or it's 10p per mile, and that would make a lot more sense to me, and I think that would make a lot of sense to others as well. So the way we talk about the functions, the features of the car, how far it can go, I'm very much aware of that. I'm really much trying to tackle some of the difficult jargon, especially when it comes to financing as well. You know, there are so many ins and outs. It's more like, what's your monthly payment and what will it include? That's it, isn't it? That's the key. So I'd like to bring everybody back, all the panelists back, then just for a couple of final questions, if we've got time. We've got about 3 minutes left. So it's been a fantastic session. Thanks so much. So I think just for me, it comes down to, I think, you know, absolutely, there's no question about it. We do need to make public charging more accessible, safer for women and those who identify as women, and indeed any vulnerable party. So that's absolutely crystal clear. There's so much great work going on in this area, and I think if we go back to what Erin said at the start, you know, electric cars are more suited to women. Well, if we can just continue to collaborate, continue to work together, then, you know, I'm sure we will get there. We have to get there. So yeah, just any final thoughts from you, Kate?
I've been trying to answer all the Q&A, and there have been so many amazing questions. So I think, you know, this is the start of a very, very long road, but let's get there together. And if anybody has any more questions, please just find me on LinkedIn and let me know. I'm happy to help.
Thanks so much, Kate. Erin, I know you have to go in probably less than 2 minutes. So any final thought from you?
No, it's just to stay conscious, everyone, of trying to get women in front of the camera, get women writing things, get women talking to consumers, more women everywhere.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Good luck with the rest of your day, Erin. Thank you. Charnjit, final thought from you.
A final thought is, as a woman of colour, I think my EV journey, I hope it inspires other people to come into the sector, and make it more inclusive.
Thanks, Charnjit. Maria.
I think for me, Gill, it's around whether we want to keep making progress, and if we do, we've got to tackle some other maybe more complex and difficult issues that we haven't tackled so far when it comes to you know, the masses that aren't early adopters, the ones that need accessibility more than others, you know, the safety issues that Kate talked about, finding ways for investors to really reach out to more sort of rural areas, for example, is something we haven't touched upon at all. But yeah, that's where I see the real efforts need to happen now.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Maria. And finally, Iryna, any final thought from you?
Absolutely. I just want to sort of to reiterate the point that there are many fantastic organizations out there, large and small, that will never stop innovating to make this place more sustainable. And we really, really want more brilliant women to join the industry, to really drive that forward, to really help us drive that forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Iryna. Yes, let's continue to make our voices heard in this sector, absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure to host this panel. Thanks so much to Green TV. Thank you so much to the EV Summit series on this Empowering Electric Women panel on what is today International Women's Day. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.